Good evening, my friends. Sometimes history doesn't change with a loud explosion, but with something so small, so invisible, that most people never even notice it. A chip, smaller than your fingernail, lighter than a feather, and yet powerful enough to decide the future of nations. Today, the world isn't fighting over oil the way it did in the past. It's fighting over semiconductors. And this new war, the chip war, has created winners and losers that no one expected. When you hear chip war, you probably imagine America and China staring each other down, trading tariffs, blocking exports, building factories like fortresses. Yes, that's happening. The US is pouring billions into domestic manufacturing. China is racing to achieve chip independence. Taiwan sits in the middle like the crown jewel everyone wants to protect. But while these giants clash, something fascinating has happened. A third player, almost overlooked, almost dismissed, has quietly walked onto the stage, and that player is India. Now, many people laughed when India first spoke about semiconductors. They said, India, the land of software engineers and call centers. You're good with code, with IT outsourcing, but chips, that's hardware. That's manufacturing. That's expensive, messy, and requires years of precision. They said India didn't stand a chance. But here's the twist. When the elephants fought, India built the grass. While others were blocking each other with restrictions, India opened doors with partnerships. While some nations fought to guard old factories, India focused on building new ones from the ground up with the future in mind. Let me tell you a story. Last year, I met a group of young engineers in Bengaluru. They weren't working for the big IT firms. They were working in a clean room, dressed head to toe in white suits, testing wafers under microscopes. And they said to me, we are not just learning how to design chips, we are learning how to build the future inside them. That moment struck me because it reminded me of China's journey decades ago when nobody believed we could build world-class factories until one day we did. India is walking the same path, but faster and with lessons already learned from the rest of the world. The US imposed restrictions on China's access to advanced chips, thinking it would slow down global competition. Instead, it sent shockwaves through the supply chain. Companies started asking, where else can we build? Where can we diversify risk? Who has the talent, the market, and the hunger? And every road pointed toward India. Think about it. A country with the largest pool of engineers, one of the youngest populations, and a government that has finally realized this isn't just about jobs. This is about power, semiconductor power. So suddenly you see billion-dollar announcements, Micron setting up a plant in Gujarat. Foxconn is exploring chip partnerships. Vedanta is pushing into semiconductor fabs. And people are still asking why India? Isn't this too ambitious? I say no, it is perfectly timed. Because while the US and China are busy defending their castles, India is quietly building new cities. But this isn't just about factories. It's about ecosystems. Chips need talent, logistics, design companies, testing labs, and research universities. And here's the secret: India already has the brain power. For years, Indian engineers have been designing chips for Intel, Qualcomm, Nvidia, just not inside India. They were working in California, in Taiwan, in Singapore. Now imagine bringing that brain power back home, aligning it with government incentives, and connecting it to a global market that's desperate for a neutral, reliable supplier. That's not just a small shift. That's a revolution. Some say, but chips require billions of dollars and years to mature. True. India is not going to replace Taiwan overnight. But that's not the point. The point is momentum. Every crisis in the world creates an opportunity for someone prepared. And right now, while the world is distracted by the US-China rivalry, India has positioned itself as the neutral ground where East and West can both invest. It's not about choosing sides. It's about being the bridge. And in a world divided by politics, bridges become priceless. Do you see the irony? America tried to block China, thinking it would strengthen itself. But what happened? The supply chain didn't shrink, it expanded. And in that expansion, India stepped in. The tariffs and bans meant to weaken one rival ended up empowering another competitor that no one had planned for. This is why I say the chip war is not just about technology. It's about unintended consequences. And let's not forget the emotional side of this. For decades, Indians watched as their brightest minds left for Silicon Valley. Parents would proudly say, "My son works at Intel. My daughter is at Google." But there was always a quiet pain. Why not here? Why not in our land? For the first time in history, India is giving its young people a chance to build not just for America, but for India and for the world. That pride, that hope is a force stronger than any tariff or subsidy. So when I look at the global map today, I see a new energy. Yes, America and China are still fighting. Yes, Taiwan is still the fortress. But India has slipped into the story in a way no one expected. And that's why when I talk about the future of chips, I don't just see machines. I see young faces, hungry faces, determined to prove that the world underestimated them for too long. People often underestimate how momentum works. Momentum is not just about speed. It's about direction, about a chain reaction where one spark ignites another. And right now, India's semiconductor story has that spark. When the first announcements came, Micron in Gujarat, Vedanta's partnership talks, many people thought it was symbolic, a PR move, a way for the government to look ambitious. But momentum doesn't ask for permission. Once it starts, it gathers weight, it attracts players, it creates a gravity field where suddenly everyone wants to be involved. You see, semiconductors are not like smartphones or apps, where a single company can dominate overnight. This is an ecosystem play. You need designers, fabs, raw materials, testing, packaging, and global customers. And this is where India's chip momentum is unique. India doesn't need to start from zero. For decades, Indian engineers have been inside the system, working for Intel, Qualcomm, Nvidia, AMD, designing, testing, and debugging. They were in the back offices, doing the hard work, but the logos were foreign. Now, those same engineers are saying, if the world is willing to build in India, why not make India's name the logo? And here's where it gets interesting. Most people think of India's semiconductor journey as government-driven. Incentives, subsidies, announcements. But the real engine isn't politics, it's talent. If you look closely, almost every major semiconductor breakthrough in Silicon Valley had Indian fingerprints on it. Chip architecture at Intel, AI hardware at Nvidia, low power designs at Qualcomm, all touched by Indian engineers. What's different today is the stage. Before they were stars in someone else's movie. Now, the world is giving them a chance to be directors of their own. Let me tell you about something I heard quietly in Silicon Valley. Nvidia, the most valuable chip company in the world today, the king of AI GPUs, has been ramping up its hiring in India. Not for basic support work, but for core R&D. Why? Because Jensen Huang, Nvidia's CEO, knows something very simple. AI is not just about chips, it's about the people who design them. And if you want the largest, youngest pool of engineers trained in math, physics, and code, you go where the numbers are irresistible. You go to India, and Nvidia isn't alone. Intel already has one of its biggest design centers in Bengaluru. AMD is quietly expanding. Qualcomm has been here for years. Do you see the pattern? Before a single mega fab is even operational, India has already become the brain hub of global semiconductor design. The fabs are important, yes, but the brain power is priceless. And this brain power is exactly what makes momentum unstoppable. Now, here's the twist most people don't realize. The chip war between the US and China has created not just fear, but also concentration. America doesn't want to rely on Taiwan. China doesn't want to rely on America. Everyone is looking for a neutral, trusted partner. And here's India, not locked in the same geopolitical boxing match, saying our market is open, our talent is ready, our government is giving incentives, and our demographics are unbeatable. That positioning, it's almost accidental genius. Think of it like this. In global supply chains, there's something called China for one. Every multinational wants to keep China as a factory, but also wants a backup. For semiconductors, that Upsi-1 candidate has become India. And once you get into the for one strategy, something magical happens. The investment never stops at one. First comes the design center, then the packaging unit, then the small fab, then the suppliers, then universities build labs. Suddenly, you're not a Lufs one, you're a core hub. That is how momentum works. And the impact of this momentum is global, because the semiconductor supply chain is like blood in the body. It flows everywhere. If India strengthens its chip base, it's not just India that benefits. African startups building AI solutions will find cheaper access. European companies worried about supply chain risks will find stability. Even American firms will quietly thank India, because diversifying production in India is still better than being entirely dependent on Taiwan or South Korea. I'll give you an example. Think about AI today. Every company in the world is desperate for Nvidia's GPUs. The waiting lists are long and the costs are crazy. But imagine if India becomes a major packaging and testing hub for those GPUs. Imagine if India's design engineers accelerate new architectures optimized for emerging markets. That doesn't just reduce costs, it changes who gets access to AI power. Instead of only the richest countries, AI could spread faster into developing regions. And that has ripple effects on education, healthcare, and finance. This is how a local momentum becomes a global shift. But there's another hidden angle here. Pride, national pride. For decades, India has been seen as the back office of the world. Good at code, cheap at labor, reliable at support. But not the leader, not the front seat. This semiconductor wave is changing that perception. When a country moves from exporting brains to building industries, its identity changes. And that identity change, psychologically, emotionally, is the real fuel behind momentum. People are no longer asking, can we do it? They are asking, how fast can we do it? And of course, momentum attracts competitors. The US wants to bring chip making back home. Europe is funding its fabs. China is pouring trillions into independence. But here's the lesson in a connected world. No one wins by isolation. You win by being the bridge everyone needs. And right now, India is positioning itself as that bridge between East and West, between talent and capital, between demand and supply. That bridge role is far more powerful than being a fortress. When I speak to young entrepreneurs in India, I tell them, don't just think about chips as hardware, think about them as leverage. The nation that controls semiconductors controls digital destiny. Every smartphone, every satellite, every AI tool, every electric car, they all depend on chips. If India plays this right, it's not just joining the game, it's shaping the future rules of the game. And this is why Nvidia's quiet moves are so important. Because they see it already. They see India not as a secondary office, but as a future epicenter. And once one giant sees it, others follow. That is how momentum becomes unstoppable. So when people say, India is too late, Taiwan and South Korea already dominate, I smile. Because history doesn't always reward the first movers. Sometimes it rewards the fast learners. And India, after decades of watching others, is now learning at lightning speed. When I look at India today, standing at the edge of a semiconductor revolution, I feel the same energy I felt when China was just beginning its internet journey. Back then, nobody believed we could build something that would challenge the biggest companies in the world. People laughed at Alibaba. They said we had no chance against eBay, Amazon, or the Western giants. But belief, combined with timing and talent, is the most dangerous force in the world. It can move mountains. And right now, India is in that exact moment. The climax of this story is not about factories or government press releases. It is about choice. India has the choice to remain a service hub, quietly supporting the innovations of others, or to become the architect of its digital destiny. That choice will define not just the next decade of Indian growth, but also the balance of power in the global economy. Because let's be honest, chips are not just pieces of silicon. They are sovereign. Whoever controls them controls the future. And here is where the lesson becomes sharp. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards execution. India has the talent, it has the market, it has the geopolitical opening. But none of that matters unless execution is relentless. If projects get stuck in bureaucracy, if visions die in red tape, then this golden chance slips away. But if execution is disciplined, if the private sector and government stay aligned, if young entrepreneurs are given oxygen to dream, then what looks like a small spark today will light a fire that reshapes industries across continents. The momentum we talked about before creates its own gravity, but momentum is fragile if not protected. The lesson from history is clear. Every rising power faces doubters, distractions, and delays. Japan in the 80s, Korea in the 90s, China in the 2000s. The secret is not to avoid mistakes. The secret is to keep moving despite mistakes. Speed matters more than perfection. Now, let's talk about Nvidia again, because this is where the hidden story lies. Most people see Nvidia as a chip maker, but actually, it is a platform company. It doesn't just sell GPUs, it builds ecosystems. QA, AI software stacks, global developer communities. By investing deeper in India, Nvidia is sending a signal. We don't just want to sell chips to you. We want you to be part of the design, part of the future. And when the world's most valuable semiconductor company opens that door, India must walk through it boldly. Because the lesson is simple. When giants extend their hand, you don't hesitate. You grip it and you climb. Some people ask me, why does this matter to the world? Why should an African entrepreneur care about India's chips? Why should a European startup care if Nvidia opens a new lab in Bengaluru? The answer is ripple effects. Every dollar invested in Indian semiconductor capacity reduces global bottlenecks. Every innovation tested in India makes technology more affordable globally. Every supply chain that runs through India increases resilience for everyone. This is not just India's story. It is humanity's story. But here comes the emotional truth. For decades, young Indians left home to find opportunity abroad. Their families waved goodbye at airports, proud but also sad, knowing that the brightest minds were building futures for someone else's country. If this chip momentum is nurtured properly, the next generation will no longer have to choose between ambition and homeland. They can stay, innovate, and lead while remaining in India. That shift from brain drain to brain gain is not just economics. It is dignity. It is pride. And pride is the foundation of unstoppable progress. Let me give you a personal reflection. When I was building Alibaba, I learned one lesson the hard way: competitors will always be bigger, richer, and more powerful. But if you have purpose, you become dangerous. Amazon was bigger. eBay was richer. But our purpose was clear. We wanted to empower small businesses in China. That clarity gave us courage. India must find the same clarity in chips. It cannot just be about copying what Taiwan did or what the US is doing. It must be about India's purpose. Maybe that purpose is making AI accessible for the global south. Maybe it is leading in sustainable green chip manufacturing. Maybe it is building chips optimized for low-cost devices in education and healthcare. Whatever the choice, the purpose must be clear. Because without purpose, momentum gets lost. With purpose, it becomes destiny. And here's the warning. Destiny doesn't wait. The world is moving fast. The US is pouring billions into the KPS Act. China is investing with a level of intensity that is almost frightening. Europe is determined to secure its independence. The clock is ticking. India has a window. maybe 5 years, maybe less, to turn ambition into infrastructure, into ecosystems, into products. If it misses that window, the story could collapse into what could have been. But if it seizes it, the story becomes what finally arrived. So what should the audience take away? The climax is this: India is no longer just the world's back office. It is becoming the world's laboratory. And if you are an entrepreneur, an investor, a policymaker, or even a student, this matters to you. Because semiconductors are the currency of the digital age, and where they are built will determine where wealth, innovation, and influence flow. Now, let's talk about the deeper human lesson. Every great transformation begins with doubt. People doubted China, they doubted e-commerce, they doubted renewable energy. And now, people doubt India's chip dream. But doubt is the shadow of greatness. If nobody doubts you, you are not aiming high enough. India must embrace that doubt as motivation. It must prove, not by words but by results, that it can turn skepticism into admiration. And finally, the call to action. If you are watching this, you are not just an observer. You are part of this story. Maybe you are a student learning chip design. Maybe you are an entrepreneur looking at supply chain gaps. Maybe you are an investor considering where the next frontier lies. Or maybe you are simply someone who believes in the power of rising nations to reshape the world. Whatever your role, don't sit back. Engage, learn, invest, contribute. Because revolutions are never built by governments alone. They are built by people who choose to participate. When I look at India's semiconductor journey, I don't just see factories and chips. I see a nation on the verge of rewriting its role in history. I see a story where the back office becomes the front seat, where the doubt becomes decisive, where the world, for once, turns not to Silicon Valley or Shenzhen, but to Bengaluru, Hyderabad, and Gujarat and says, show us the way. And that, my friends, is not just India's opportunity. It is India's responsibility to lead, to execute, to inspire. The world is watching. The question is not whether India can do it. The question is, will India dare to believe in itself enough to finish what it has started? Thank you for listening. I hope this makes you think about where the world is truly heading. And if you want to see the bigger picture, don't miss my other talks on Apple in India, Nvidia's secret bet, and the innovations shaking America's giants.